guest star, Mary Robinette. How
Hello.
you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's a little fervent here because I've been signing these tip-in pages for Tor and for Gallants, and that meant all the books that people buy from my store were unsigned, and there were orders stacking up. And so I'm signing big stacks of books for people.
Yeah. Yeah, we just opened. I finally, having taken your advice from years ago to buy my backstock, actually, but like we did that, but then my ability to actually send things out is very low. However, we finally got that sorted, and suddenly I'm having to sign books at home, which is like, oh, hello. I've trained Rob, for those of you who, hello, everyone, my husband, trained him to flap pages and
Cool.
Yes. So we do a production line, not as long as your production line though.
But we can now get signed books if we want signed books.
If you want
we can
signed
order
books,
them.
Yes, you can go to you could always go to my local indie bookstore, Parnassus, and I put in a plug for them, but now you can actually get them from my house.
I don't think I've ever signed at Parnassus. I've heard of them though before.
Oh, they're lovely. They're such good people. They just Ann Patchett, the owner, one of the founders, is a writer, so it's such a writer-friendly store.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard, I don't know, we'd have to ask them, that indie bookstores are doing kind of okay, not in COVID, but up until COVID, like people were kind of going back to print. We'd hit an equilibrium and things like that. And so I love hearing that there are indie bookstores still going that have survived all of this. But who knows if they'll survive this year. It's been rough on everybody.
Sorry, someone is saying that they're unhappy with how I talked down to George R. R. Martin. What I said to George, and someone else is like, what I said to him, I think in total was, George, I love you, but I'm really disappointed and angry with how you handled. But so boy, that really must have burned George, man. It's. Actually, I know exactly how he responded to that because, hey, guess what? We're friends and we talked. So, but the other thing, in answer to your going back to the thing you were talking about with the bookstores, Parnassus has a first edition club, so you can sign up, and when a first edition comes out, they will just send it signed to you.
That's awesome.
If you're in the they are, as I say, really lovely people. I am super fond of them. Which is your local store?
So my local store is the King's English up in Salt Lake, or Weller Bookworks. Which Weller is what I generally do my signed books through, but King's English does some really good YA events and things, and I'll be doing an event with them in a week digitally. So I've got two basically, and both are fantastic. Weller, like they're one of these stores that just as soon as an author local they hear about, they invite them. Back when I wasn't just nobody, I was nobody, right? Yeah. They're like, oh, come in, do a signing. And just treated me like I was a real author, even, I was, but it's hard to feel like you're a real author when your first book is out. Owners took me to dinner and just awesome.
Yeah. I went in there for my first book too, and again, just the nicest people and such a nice space.
I've been to your events there. I got to watch the Shadowbox puppet show at Weller Bookworks. So yeah, I think you were touring with somebody. Was it?
Oh, it was with Marie Brennan.
Marie? Yeah,
Marie Brennan from her Lady Trent books, which I'll put in a plug. For for everybody else, you read The Lady Trent Moores by Marie Brennan. She's a naturalist who specializes in dragons, and it reads as if the Dowager Countess from Downton Abbey was the author. They are fantastic. I love them so much.
So we had a book come out this week.
Yes, we did.
Robinette. We released a book. We should maybe talk about that.
Oh, yeah. Hey.
Yes, we did a book.
Yeah. How original of us.
I think this is my first true collaboration, right? Because the Wheel of Time ones, you can't really call that. You can, but it was I was handed his material. I didn't actually get to work with him. And so it was really fun to actually work with another author. I know you've most authors have just done this a ton. I don't know. How much have you done it?
So this is the first collaboration as a prose author. But coming out of stage, I had a public company, and so I would collab with my creative partner on stuff all the time. So it's
right.
The back and forth process is familiar. But the the nuts and bolts of it, totally different. Yeah.
Because I know Eric Flint does it on all of his books and things like that. Yeah. But I had never really tried it. I mean, there's a short story I did with a friend of mine that maybe counts, but really, this was a lot of fun. This was
I saw on as people were plugging questions into the on Twitter. I saw a number of people wanting to know how our process worked. So maybe we should talk about and tell people how we did that.
Yeah, sure. So this, I suggested the process that I knew that Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss used on the Dragonlance books, which was, for those, Tracy came up with an outline in a world, sent them to Margaret. She wrote the first draft, sent it back. Tracy did a draft, sent it back, and then Margaret did a draft, and then done. And that felt like the way to go on this. The main reason I was looking to work with you on this is when I thought of this idea, I thought, man, the voice of this character just has to really work. And I wasn't 100% confident I could do it.
I don't think you told me that part of it.
Didn't I? I was looking at this, I'm like, this is going to be really tricky. And I don't know, it felt like yes, if in my books, we do this. You have been a married man writing from married man's viewpoint. I've been writing as a married woman writing from married woman's viewpoint. This is what we do. We specialize in this. Yeah. But something about this story being about a woman searching for what happened to her husband and things just felt very something about it. I'm like, I want help on this.
Yeah.
And I thought of you immediately.
Well, I think also one of the things we talked about was the fact that you were planning for this to be for audio. And
yes.
And since I have written for radio and then also am a narrator, that it gives me a certain leg up in knowing, oh, this will play well in audio and this will not.
Well, and the first Lady Astronaut story was written as an audio original, wasn't it?
That is correct.
The novella, not the novels, but the novella. Yeah,
Lady Astronaut of Mars. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot of fun to kind of dig in and play with that. There are places where I still I'm like, I think we could have pushed farther, but that is kind of always my reaction to all the things.
It was really fun for me to be on the phone chatting because I just, I don't think about the audio things where you're like, oh no, in audio it'll be like this. This is why we're doing it this way. And I'd be like, oh, that's okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted, but I didn't know it yet. That this is how to make that happen.
Yeah, well, one of the things I think also with audio is that when you've got a good narrator, and then we had Julie Whalen for this, um, you can leave space for them to bring additional layers. So there's a lot of stuff where in prose I would have to make absolutely certain that the language was not ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
In audio, I can have some ambiguous language, leave a note to the narrator, especially for something that is planned to be just audio. I can leave a note to the narrator, say, read it disdainful, and they will deliver that. And so you can have often more concision in language because so much of it is carried by voice tone.
Yeah. It's really an interesting, for those who don't know, one of the reasons that we did this as an audio original is that audio is really booming. Like, this is the growth segment of books right now. And every year I look at my percentages and audio has grown. People just really love audio, which is letting, the place where you can do the kind of new cool things right now is often in audio.
Yeah.
This is where you can get publishers who want to experiment with different types of things, and you can try stuff, and you can do a novella like this in audio now, when once upon a time this was a harder sell in audio. And now, they were right on board from the get-go. Recorded books, this sounds great, do it.
Yes.
So yeah,
which makes it a lot of fun as well to be able to craft something for a specific medium.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's so often, I was talking with John Scalzi about this, that the way he writes for the page didn't work well when he translated it to audiobook for Red Shirts.
Oh yeah,
because he had written it on the page to look reminiscent of a script. So he had he said, she said in front of every line of dialogue, or maybe it was after every line of dialogue.
I did the audio on that. That's how I read Red Shirts. And it was really interesting. Like, that popped out at me. I'm like, wow, there would be a lot. It would read better without that.
Yeah. And normally you gloss over it, but you can't stop hearing it, she said.
Yeah. It was Will Wheaton, which was a great read for Red Shirts.
Yes.
Great connection there. But yeah, I specifically noticed that while I was listening to it. And so, yeah, it's interesting that he noticed that too.
Yeah. So he said that he's actually backed off and no longer does as many dialogue tags as used to because of that. And I tend to avoid them when I'm writing because I know my stuff now is going into audio. So I go ahead and write for audiobooks. So I saw someone just say that they can't focus on audiobooks because their hands and eyes feel idle. This is what projects are for. So I listen to audiobooks when I am doing handwork, like crocheting, or when I'm clean. Let me tell you, your house will never be as clean as it is when you are listening to an audiobook and you just, it's like, oh, just one more chapter. I think I'm going to vacuum the bathroom now.
I've done that doing the dishes. I'm like, oh, I can do these ones by hand. I actually listened to Red Shirt while I was doing this. I had gotten big stacks of tip-in pages, and I'm like, I need a good book. If you guys haven't read Red Shirts, it is great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But yeah,
so much fun.
The best audiobook, if I told you this, I listened to all of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Is a book that I tried to read a couple of times, and I really liked what I read, but I never got through it because I just bounced off it. It's very dense, and it's really well written. But then I did the audio, and it was like I was transported back in time to someone reading me a story. And Jonathan Strange works very well as like a fairy tale for adults kind of thing. And it was transfixing and wonderful. The reader was amazing. I don't remember his name, I'm afraid, but just a wonderful audiobook, and a book that I didn't manage to get through in print a couple of tries. for.
Oh yeah, I loved it in print. How did they do the footnotes, or did they just skip them?
So the footnotes were bad. I will admit that they did them at the end, as I recall.
Oh yeah, no,
It's just not a great way to do the footnotes. Maybe they interrupted. All I remember is that the footnotes were a little annoying, but like the narrator's voice was so storybookish and whimsical, and it's not if you haven't read it, it's a very different book. I've never read anything quite like it. It feels like a book that was written in the 1900s or the 1800s. It feels like a 19th century book, but with some modern storytelling understanding. Very nice.
Yeah, so people are asking what I'm crocheting. This is this shawl is Terra, like the planet, Terra, and it's patterned by Laura Krizak, and I'm pretty sure that I would, if I narrated this, I would need to look up the pronunciation. But the last name is Krzak. You can find it on Ravelry. The Terra shawl. It's a December's Child design. So there's one of the best audiobooks that I loved was Codename Verity. Have you listened to this one?
I've heard of that book, but I haven't read it. I bet
so good. Yeah. The narrators are just so good. But one of the things about it that's interesting is that in the printed book, there are apparently codes hidden in the printed book that you can decode and get some additional information. And they decided just to not even try that really in the audiobook. So which was informative, and you don't miss them. Like I am tempted to get the printed book so that I can see what they did. But that was very informative for me when we were doing Relentless Moon, because there are some coded letters that my characters send back and forth. And I had to figure out how to do that so that audiobook listeners could hear it, because it was the first letter of each sentence. So I would just hit that word extra hard, which made the reading of the sentence, the letter, a little bit odd. The only way that I could figure out to tell people this is where the sentence starts. That's the word you're looking for.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. You don't think about these. I don't think about things. You do, but I don't. In one of my books, one of the sets of epigraphs in a Stormlight book are insane-ish ramblings that a character wrote when they were having a vision. Right? And one of those is a list of numbers that are kind of him making up his own code language and things, and it looks really cool on the page. You're like, what is this? But then Michael Kramer had to read it, and I felt so bad when I remembered, oh wait, Michael Kramer had to spend like 20 minutes reading letters to the audiobook. Probably not 20 minutes, but
it was very long, and I remember I've seen several memes because of that chapter.
Yeah. These things I don't think of.
Yeah, when I'm narrating, we will have a discussion about whether or not to skip or amend or make some other change. And we'll have those conversations with the author. Not everybody does, and sometimes people don't. Sometimes people are like, it's got to be there.
I know Michael much better now than I used to, and Kate. If they would have, if I would have thought of it, I would have said to them, just say, a whole bunch of weird numbers are written here. Scrawled, I would have written a little paragraph for him to write, to read instead. But it is fun to have the memes, I guess.
One of the most challenging things that are one of the weirdest adaptations was I narrated Sherry Priest's I Am Princess X.
Okay.
And part of the book was told as graphic novel. And I think without words. I think it was just pictures.
So what did you do?
So we went to Sherry and we said, can you write a radio play for us? And so when we got to the radio play sections, she described what was happening, and I went into a radio announcer voice, and then she walked down the street. It was just this huge melodramatic thing to indicate that it was a different medium. It was a lot of fun, but man, what a pain for Sherry, because she had to rewrite it on the fly, like so fast.
Yeah. It's a cool idea, though. It makes me. I did the early 20th century Mistborn novels, where we had broadsheets printed in the books. We should have write for the audiobooks separate little radio dramas that are kind of the same thing, the ephemera from In-World, because the broadsheets are really cool, but they don't really work in the audio, and I don't think they even read them in the audio.
Yeah. Yeah, in the Faded Sky, they do a radio play for the people on the other ship, and so it was so tempting to do the sound effects, because I've done Foley for radio. I'm like, I know how to do these sound effects. I put real sound effects in, and I'm like, and then the radio play sounds more real than the rest of the book,
right?
No sound effects.
Bad idea. Yeah.
Painfully did not. The only thing we wound up doing was I did. Oh, do I have one in here? I don't. For anytime one of my characters was in a helmet, I held up a plastic cup to cause voice.
I've actually heard that. I went and listened to it because I had read the book prose. You told me about that, and I wanted to hear how it went, because I heard you tell that story. So I actually went and listened to that chapter.
Oh, that's funny.
It sounded really real. It did not sound like a cup. It sounded like,
Have I told you where I got that trick?
No. Where'd you get that trick?
So, my friend Mr. Snuffleupagus, Martin P. Robinson is a friend of mine, and he telling me about how when he goes into the booth to record Snuffy, that he has to take in a plastic cup, because when he's doing the voice when they're filming, Snuffy's nose, there's this cone that comes out of the trunk, and it affects the sound of his voice. And the first time he recorded something in studio, it was like, well, this sounds completely wrong. So he got a plastic cup to mimic that sound. And so I stole that bodily.
Wow. That's really cool. That's a great story.
Yeah.
What do you think about the full cast audio things? Have you listened to any of those, like Graphic Audio does, or things like that?
Yeah. I once upon a time I was an audiobook reviewer. So I love full cast. I think that it's great. I don't think that every book needs it, and sometimes I do think action. But for the most part, I think it's just it can add so much dimension and to an audiobook that in the right hands, with the right material, it's like listening to a play.
Yeah, I really like them, and I think they're becoming a little more mainstream now. I think some things have happened behind the scenes that is getting graphic audio kind of. For once upon a time, it was actually pretty hard to get those graphic audio. I remember when you had to go to their website and even buy the physical medium. I don't even know if they had digital downloads yet back in the very early days, the Wild West of things. But now I think you can get the digital downloads just on regular audiobook sites and things like that. So it's very cool. I really like them. Yeah. They're way more effort intensive on their side, though. Man, the work they go through to make.
Yeah. Do you know if they are recording them with the cast there, or if they're recording them individual lines and sending them in?
I thought they got the cast together. I asked once, and I honestly can't remember. That's my impression. You would have to ask them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they do the Foley work in the booth like they used to.
No. That's later.
That's all added in post. But I thought that they were getting groups together, but I could be imagining that.
It may also depend.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I actually got to meet them. I had dinner with them right when they were first interested in my stuff. So that was like 2007 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah. They do good work. They do very good work.
It was back when Borders was still around, because it was before my signing, and Borders at Tyson's Corner in Virginia. Man, I like that store.
Yeah, wow, that is a long time ago when Borders was around. Someone just asked, "What's the topic here?" I missed it. I'm like, there is no topic. We are just rambling.
We have a book out, and you all should go buy it and listen to it. That's the topic. But really, we don't get to hang out with friends as much anymore, at least not in person. And so you basically hear us catching up and chatting about things we find interesting.
Yeah, this is literally what happens when I go to Utah to record Writing Excuses.
Yeah.
Brandon will be sitting at the table signing stuff, and I'll come out and sit with him with crochet, and we will shoot the breeze.
Mm-hmm.
We
won't do it here, but usually we're pitching ideas at each other and kind of brainstorming the various books that we're thinking about doing and stuff like that. That you don't get to hear on the stream.
No, if you were not here, then I would be asking you a plot question right now, in fact.
I can tell you that you're going to be so proud of me. I can't talk about details, but I wrote a picture book, 127 words, Mary Robinette. 127 words.
Of you. How long is the outline?
Okay, so the outline is really long. But that's because, so the reason I was able to be so short is the joke of the picture book is that the description that goes with the picture is comically simplistic. And then the picture, I spend like a page describing each one, so that the actual text is 127 words, but the pitch is like 3,000 words or something like that.
Okay.
It's just ridiculously long.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted, as long as you were true to form, that's all I needed.
Yes, I was true to form. The reason I did it is because one of the things that we want to do eventually is each of the Stormlight books has, for those watching, I won't give spoilers, but there's a character in the books named Wit who's a storyteller who will tell stories to the other characters. And I would eventually like to do those as picture books. I think they would adapt really well. But wanting to do that and not knowing the form, I'm like, I really ought to learn the form before I expect to do something like that. So I'm like, I'm going to go research picture books. I'm going to look at the lengths and read all the stuff on doing, and then try my hand at it and see if a publisher is interested in just a standard, not based on the Stormlight books. And then if I'm lucky and it sells, which there's no guarantee, then I'll be able to watch the process as I like to do as something is getting made, and hopefully learn more about it and things like that. So that's why I did it.
Yeah,
so, that's my rationalization.
Have a picture book coming out.
Yeah.
Which I also can't talk about because we are doing formal announcement. But it has been such a cool process. The back and forth with the artist, who is phenomenal and I love so much, has been great. I will say that it is a science fiction picture book. And what was fun was that as soon as she understood that I wanted some level of realism, but that I also understood that, things are going to be stylized, she is delivering stuff. It's like, yeah, no, that looks right. And it looks delightfully stylized in keeping with the rest of the world. It's so satisfying.
Yeah. People might be asking, some of my team asked this, like, well, we could just hire an artist to do this, Brandon. I'm like, no, that's not the point here. The point is to send it in and see see experts make something before we try to make the thing. If that makes sense. Yeah. So for those wondering, why don't you just hire an artist? That's not what I want to do. I want to see what the publisher does with this, how they go about picking, how they choose, how they facilitate working with the illustrator, the sorts of things they need. They know the business and I don't.
Yeah. Well, and like an experienced illustrator, and that's who they've got me paired with. She's just bringing so much visual joy to the story, and also a language. There's a language to telling a picture book that's not the same as prose. Like there's some from my days back as an art major. There's a semantics to the movement on a page that technically I was taught that like 30 years ago, but not. That there's a big difference between that and what my artist does. She added, I can say this because it's not a spoiler, but when the picture book comes out, for those of you who discover this in 2022 and are looking at it, the red buttons are totally her idea. And they are they really you'll forgive me, put a button on it.
Yeah. No, I did this for screenplays. You've worked I assume you wrote stage plays and things for what you were doing. Have you ever written a screenplay?
No, the radio play and stage and video game.
Okay. Because I was wanting to give more feedback on screenplays. I was getting them in. I'm like, I don't know this form. So my way of learning it was to write a screenplay. It was so bad. It was terrible. It was bad in a wonderful way, because it went wrong in the way that it feels like a book author would make something go wrong, right?
Yes.
It was that I was used to having more words and more scenes to get across what I wanted. And by the time I got to the end, things were just not properly foreshadowed and weren't working together. The whole ending fell apart. So no one will ever read it. It's terrible. But man, was it useful for me to be like, oh, this is what screenwriters are going through when they're trying to adapt my work. Hopefully now I'm a little better at giving feedback.
Yeah, what I've discovered when I am writing for... Oh, I'm wrong. I have written for...
Oh,
yeah, kind of. But very short things. But what I found is when I write for radio or for stage, or I forgot that there was a tiny bit of screenwriting there, is that what I have to do is I have to write a short story first, which is essentially a treatment, and then adapt that for stage. And then even there, I'm having to make, even though I wrote it and I knew I was writing it to be visual, I still am having to make adjustments.
I had to make huge adjustments. I did a treatment for Mistborn recently that I've talked about, where I'm like, all right, how would I envision this getting made? And I basically had to throw out the book, start with the same premise, characters, and idea, and build it again for the medium rather than trying to pick specific scenes. Because specific scenes that I wrote in the books are there to work on the page. I needed a scene that did the same thing, but wasn't all internal, not really internal, but the character responding in their head. It needed to work just differently. I have a lot more respect for adaptation now.
Yeah, I'm always the... sorry, someone says it ends with the relentless moon. There's a fourth book that comes out in 2022, and it's called The Martian Contingency, and I've got a loose outline for it. And I would be asking Brandon questions. Were all of the questions that I have not deeply spoilery? We would totally be pushing that back and forth right now.
I feel very proud that I feel I helped with that series in some of these brainstorming sessions. Though, of course, you did the same with The Emperor's Soul, which then won the Hugo Award. So we both have kind of helped on books that went far.
Yes, yes. It's as if having peers that you talk to, and it's as if collaboration can help improve things.
Yeah.
Something actually, talking about collab and screenplays, one of the things that that folks might be interested in with the original is that you were specifically thinking about creating something for audio, but that would adapt well to screen. And so there were some things, like you gave me the Bible and you gave me an outline. It was essentially a treatment. But there were some things in it that I looked at and I'm like, well, that's not going to play in audio.
Yeah. Yep. We had some long conversations on the phone. We were like, all right, we got to cut this. What do we put in its place? And I'm like, oh, okay. Let's talk it through.
Yeah. What's the intention of this scene? So that we can do that in this other medium. And this is not spoiler because I'm just talking about a location, but the nightclub scene. Conveying that and all of the different, like, the chaotic nightmare that was.
Which was that's written for film. Just completely written for film.
It's going to be so good for film. And I actually argued to cut it because I was like, this is nightmare in audio. And but because you were like,
you did a film, that worked really well.
Thank you. And also, I mean, the having the audio, the music support there really helped with the whiplash of it. But getting geography and the changes without slowing the pacing of the action down, it was like, oh my God.
I was very happy to be a good resource to you on the action scenes in this. You were a great resource to me on the character, and I was a great resource to you on the action. I think it did the best of what both of us are very good at doing.
Yeah. Did you know, I remember we talked about this, that the scene, the restaurant scene. Did I tell you that I brought in a third collaborator?
Yes. I remember you talking about that. I now escapes me exactly how that went down, but I remember chatting about it.
Yeah. So I was on the Writing Excuses cruise, and Matthew J. Drake, who's a writer but has military service. I went to him and was like, can you just understand what someone with military, how they would view this and approach it, because I'm not. And he gave me a bullet point of how he would go through. And I initially did that and it was too much. So then we trimmed that way the heck down. And it wound up being much better. But I think that took all 3 of us.
Yeah. I've getting those subject matter experts, like the new Stormlight book. If I hadn't had some of these subject matter experts, I would have been at sea with no. What is the term? At sea with no oars? I'm missing that metaphor.
Without a paddle.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. Yep. I would have been at sea, which is a separate metaphor from. Yeah. Those are 2 metaphors. I was mixing them, but yeah, man. Someday, perhaps for fans, I will release the first draft and they can compare. But it's now so embarrassing about which things I got wrong.
Yeah. I have some of those as well. The like, oh. Yeah, I have again, like subject matter experts. When I was doing Relentless Moon, there's a unsurprising that is set in space. There's a rocket disaster. And so I had Kjell Lindgren, who's, an active astronaut, reading it. And he's also a sci-fi guy. And he's like, rockets can't take lateral stress like that. It's that they're designed for vertical stress. That's everyone's dead. I'm like, oh. Okay, how about this? Everybody's still dead. This? Still dead. How about this? Dead. Now? They're all alive, but it's really boring. I was like, oh no.
Yeah, having an actual astronaut be your subject matter expert is Is this? Yeah.
Yeah.
I did some fighter pilots on the Skyward books, and man, G-forces and stuff are so hard to get right if you haven't lived it. I thought I had done my research. Like I usually tell readers or writers, I'm like, get yourself like 50%, 60% of the way there. Then you won't make big mistakes, and then you can make tweaks after that. I felt like I was 50, 60%. I was like 5% understanding all of the G-force stuff for that book.
Yeah. I started taking flying lessons and then had to stop because of the pandemic. And like I finished my first lesson, I'm like, I want to rewrite every flight scene I have ever written in my entire life.
Yeah. Adam, you're going to learn how to be a pilot, right? You've talked about that.
To, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you can become you can pick me up and teach me how to not be a doof when I'm writing flight scenes.
You know, you can buy like military jets for like $200,000.
Only $200,000, and then $50,000 to fly one each time.
Well, I doubt it's that much, but you know, it would be awesome.
I would not about that. That fuel is not cheap.
No, it's not.
I'm sure it's not.
Yeah.
Also,
do we want to take some questions?
Yeah, let's take some questions.
Let's take some questions. Adam, why don't you throw a few questions at us?
So, like the last stream we did, I made a poll, and I made 3 different areas for questions. Questions about the original and the writing process, questions about writing, and then just other questions for both of you. The one that was the most popular about the original, let's see. They're wondering if there's going to be a physical release planned for the original at some point in the future, or if it's going to be audio only. If you guys wanted to talk about that.
I would anticipate that we would eventually do this. It was written for audio. I know we've just kind of briefly said, yeah, probably, but it's not like we've made any plans, right, Mary Robinette? It's not like we have a release in mind.
No, the conversations that we've had are basically like, yeah, that would be awesome if someone wanted it. And also I'm like, and there needs to be some rewriting.
Yeah.
because there's where I'm relying on the narrator and it won't play on the page.
Yep. So the answer is yes, probably, but we can't say when, and we have no specific plans yet.
The next
and it will be somewhat different.
No, sorry, Mary Robinette.
That's okay.
Okay. The next question, just about writing, if you guys want to talk about this back and forth, it says, when making major plot revisions, how do you prioritize changes that cascade through the rest of the piece? Chronologically, sorry, I lost the question. Chronologically moving out from the core change, or do you address the changes as they become relevant? You know, along those lines.
So for me, the biggest changes are the most important to make first, because of obvious reasons, right? If you're going to rewrite the whole book to change something big and structural, who knows what other things you will end up changing?
Let's be clear. It's nice that we're all here, but everybody wants to really see cats.
Yes,
that's what the internet is for.
The internet is for.
This is Elsie. Yes. People think it's for porn. No, it is for cats.
It's for cats.
Yeah. So carry on. I did not mean to distract anybody.
When you make big revisions, like I try to identify the biggest things first, which is easier said than done. Because for me, the way my process works is I make the changes I think need to be made. I give it to my editor, my agent, my friends, my book group, and my wife, and then they identify things. And oftentimes, if there are big things there, I'll change them. But then there's that beta reader round, which I rely a lot on my beta readers. If something just doesn't click for them, it's actually not uncommon that something clicks for all the industry professionals because they know what I was trying to do. They can anticipate it, and that influences how they read the story. And then you get it into the hands of readers who are not industry professionals, and they are just lost because you actually wrote it wrong, but no one could see it because they knew what you were trying to do. Sometimes, in fourth draft, I have to make huge revisions, and I wish I didn't have to, but I do.
Yeah, I have. I do the same thing, which is that I identify the big changes, and I identify them based on what the kind of what the emotional feel is that I want the book to have. You know, what the I feel like people pick up books to have a feeling. You know, either to be immersed in something or to. But there's a reason that you pick up a book and you want it to deliver that. And so I make my changes based on what experience I'm trying to deliver and whether or not it's going to, get in the way of delivering that or help with that. Hey, Elsie. And then I go through sequentially. Hey, Elsie, do some tricks? Do you want to do some tricks for these nice people? Yeah, I bet you do. I bet you do. Oh, wait, I thought I had treats in my pocket. We have to go to the table treats. I'm assuming that everyone would like to see tricks by a cat. Did you know
that? A parrot being on the strain who occasionally does tricks. So there's not room for the parrot with both of us. So this will be a nice thing. They'll get their pet trick fix.
Okay, Elsie, high five. Good girl.
Aww.
Okay, Elsie? Have you had your snack? Okay. Elsie, circle. Circle. Good girl. Good circle. Okay. Elsie, roll over. Roll over. No. Elsie, roll over. All the way. Come on. All the way. She doesn't have quite enough space to do it when we're at the edge of the bed. Elsie, roll over. No. I know that's the easy one. Elsie, roll over. Good girl. Good girl. Who's a good girl?
Man, cats are hard to train. We still can't get Pinecone to do rollover consistently despite years of trying, so I am impressed.
Kathy's bragging about that in the chat right now. Mm-hmm. So just so everyone knows, she didn't do a very good job.
That is awesome.
We'll see if she's doing the new one. Elsie, jump. Good girl. Good girl. High five. Really? After all of that, you're not going to do the high five? High five. Thank you. Yeah. And high five with the other paw? Just high five. Good girl. You want the remnants? Yes, she does.
I don't know if you've seen, but for Magellan, we changed high five to use the force. You put up your hand and you go like that.
That's so good.
Pretty fun. Yeah.
That's so good.
That's partially because I want a trick that people can do with him. Like, they're not going to be people are really intimidated by parrots. So I want tricks that they can do for him with a distance that he can still do. And shake means putting your hand up close to the parrot's beak. Which is not a comfortable thing to do for most people. Smartly so. Parrots do like to bite. So his high five is from a distance using the force towards you.
That is so good.
I am really impressed with the rollover.
She was a little reluctant on that. When we're on the floor, she drops and rolls immediately. But the bed, there's a bunch of pillows. She's like, but I need my space.
So no clicker. You use the good girl as the cue that she did it right. I use the clicker when we're learning a new trick. Okay.
And when we're doing training, but when we're just doing this, like when I've got an audience. I will go ahead and give her a treat for everything, but normally we'll sometimes just do things during the middle of the day. Oh yeah, no, that was a bug against the window. Very exciting. But I have the click. We do clicker training, and then we've been working on having her do the trick with just the verbal or just the hand gesture.
Right. Yep. I've been toying with teaching Magellan rollover, but it is so much work to do rollover. At least with a parrot, probably with a cat too. You just got to work with them every day for a long enough time. With a parrot, what you do is you start with a shake, and they put their hand up, and then you rock them a little bit, and then click, and you do that for a week, and then you rock them a little further and then do that, and eventually they just put up your hand when you give them the cue. They hit their claw, and you start tipping them over, and you click for that, and then eventually they will do it themselves. But it's like a good 2 months of work to do rollover for the parrot.
Yeah, so with the with rollover for Elsie, it was, you can either capture a behavior or you can shape a behavior.
Yep.
So it sounds like you have to shape it. Elsie I captured because she would get on the floor and she would roll over on her own. So I just clicked and got there.
Yeah, parrots don't do a lot of getting on their backs on their own.
No, I guess not.
I captured use the force, right? Because that's how you do it with everything. Like he wants to get up on your arm, and so you're putting your arm next to you. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to step up," and you're like, "Good job." And then you eventually get the cue to it, and now he'll do it for basically anybody. If you say use the force, he actually says it. Which is the thing about a parrot is if he wants treats, he'll go use the force, put up his paw, and then he will say, "Good bird," and then he'll expect you to give him a treat. Which is the different thing about having a parrot is they will try to give themselves the reward and tell themselves they're a good bird.
Oh no, she will do that too. She will come in and roll over and meow at me. Very demanding.
Yep.
I just hello. I just did the roll over.
You taught me to do the thing. I do the thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Back on the question, I actually had one more thing I wanted to say on this.
Yeah.
With the big changes, it is hard for me to keep in mind more than one big change for a book. I can do it, but it's hard. It's a challenge. And fortunately, the way I write books is generally I only have one big change per plot cycle or per viewpoint, right? Like I can say, all right, for this viewpoint character, my big focus change for this is changing this part of who they are. This character needs to be more proactive, right? Like that's one of the ones that I had for the new Stormlight book is there was a character that just wasn't proactive enough. And I'm like, I need to change the way that they're viewing their life and add a few scenes in appropriate places that up the character's proactivity. That was separate from a different character where I had, approached some of the mental health things the wrong way. Early beta readers were able to point me the right direction on how to do it better. And that character, I didn't change structurally their plot. I changed their response to it. And then a few places where that response did require, some major changes. But I could have in my mind, this revision, I'm doing this for this character. And I had 3 of those in my 4.0 draft. And for all the other characters, I could say, in this, we are just focusing on tightening, normal, prose, sort of cleaning. And that way, when I went to the 5.0, if there were things for those other characters, I could feel that I already done the prose tightening for them, and I could get into some of the problems they needed, and I was able to keep the big changes in my head for the other characters. And then in the last draft, I was able to do the prose tightening on their viewpoints, and that worked really well for this specific book. So the person who asked that question, maybe that's helpful.
So what I do is my novels thus far, with one exception, have all been single POV all the way through. I've written things that are not single POV, but we haven't sold them yet. And so for me, the needing to hold something about a character arc in my head, it's just one character that I have to hold. So most of the time when I'm making them, it's something about the kind of the event through line, the rest of the structure, or something that I can hold in my head. So what I tend to do is I go through and put bracketed changes of make this change here. Oh, actually, it's just occurred to me. Do y'all want to see a manuscript that's in process? Because I actually have one. We're gonna move locations, and I'm gonna take my crochet with me because normally, what I used to do, I see all of the yeses. So what I do often is not just put it down on the computer, but I'll print out. These are the changes that I want to make. Give me a second to make sure that I don't accidentally drop the computer as we settle in here. Okay. Hello, welcome to my studio place. But what I did, oh, hi, you were in my chair. I'm sorry, you all are just going to have time with Elsie. She has taken my chair. This is my life now. All right, can I sit? Hello. Okay, so this is a manuscript for a novel. And it's okay to read the first page, it's fine. All of the pages that are vertical are the one mine. The ones that are horizontal are the ones where I need to make a change to them. So second page, first page totally fine. Second page, what I have some typos, but also in here is insert masks, because I went through, I've been writing this during the pandemic, and it's no longer realistic to me to have a book set in 2070 that doesn't have masks, because I'm like, sadly, I wish that there were other answers there, but what I also realized was that if I don't have masks in my future, that it also creates a very Eurocentric future, because in lots of Asia, masks are just part of your, that's just something that people do.
Korea, that's the first time I was exposed to it, and it's if someone got sick, they wore a mask, and I'm like, wow, that's really thoughtful. And they're like, this is just what you do. Why would you not do this? And it's actually fun. Here's a quick aside. I don't want to not take over, but when I was there, masks had become a fashion statement in Korea for the first time, and people who were not sick were getting publicity photos taken with the mask as part of just their accoutrement, so to speak. And there was like a famous rock star who all the pictures for his new album were him in a mask because he liked the mask. And I'm like, wow. And it's just like how you might wear glasses in pictures or wear contacts. You might choose between them. For them, it was, sometimes I wear this mask, so I'm going to get it in the pictures. I'm going to be in this mask.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and as someone else was saying in chat, also pollution or like my allergies have been this has been the easiest allergy season for me ever, because every time I'm out, I have a mask on. It's like, oh, actually, this may just be part of my life after the pandemic. But it's lots of stuff like, wait, should this be Nadine? Who later it's like, oh, I don't need 5 different waiters. I can just have this one reappear multiple times. So it's like, here we have multiple pages right in a row that I need to change. But that's basically how I go through, and I make notes to myself about large changes, small changes, and then I work through it after I've looked at all of the things and weave them in. Oh, someone in chat just asked us, and I know Adam has questions, but I love this one, so I'm just going to ask us both.
Yeah, you go ahead.
If you could have one of your works adapted by Bollywood, what would it be? That's from Veal.
Oh, wow.
That's a great for Brandon. I'd pick Mistborn for sure, because they have such fun visuals.
They
with
have
that kind of
great
stuff.
visuals. Yeah.
Anyway, I love Bollywood so much.
Mm-hmm.
So the easy one would be Shades of Milk and Honey, because Austen adaptations in Bollywood work so well. But I also would really love to see a Bollywood, like actually the book that I'm working on right now, which the one that I was just showing you is interplanetary. It's interplanetary cruise ship between Earth and Mars, and a full-on science fiction Bollywood adaptation.
Is this the one that's got the comedy side to it, where the characters are very
the man in space? Yeah.
Yeah. That
How
would be
about you?
great.
What would you
What's that?
do? Which
of mine? It's got to be one with a good romance, right? Because Bollywood's great with romance
And musicals too.
and musical. So I would probably go with Mistborn. It has a little bit of everything, and Adam's right. It would like that unabashed, over the top action from Bollywood movies is so much fun. They just know how to have fun with a movie. So yeah, I would probably pick that.
I would probably do Elantris.
You mentioned Austin. Elantris would work too. Bride and Prejudice isn't a true Bollywood, right? Because it was filmed over here, but it is one of my favorite Austen adaptations of all time.
Yeah, it totally is. All right, could we go back to the questions?
Next question.
So, next question. This is just a general question for you guys. What is something that you want to write but don't think would be publishable? Maybe something that sounds interesting to you but wouldn't appeal to the masses.
That usually doesn't stop me from writing something if I don't think it has mass appeal, if I'm interested in it. But I'm sure there are projects I've been like, I don't know if anyone would get that but me. Dan Wells and I always brainstorm things together. And the reason it's taken us so long to actually do an adaptation or a collaboration is Dan is really weird. And I have his daughter's right there laughing. I have a very weird sort of B side to me that I usually keep a little more in check, that only really comes out when I write the right thing or something like that. And for whatever reason, when Dan and I brainstorm together, our weirdnesses fuel one another, and we come up with stuff that's just super, super, super bizarre. The story that for years we talked about writing together was to write a 19th century fantasy, as if Abraham Lincoln was writing a fanfic of Herman Melville and made a fantasy book out of it. And this is a real thing that we were like, Lincoln had such an interesting voice in writing, and where would he do this like fantasy epic? He'd read like Moby Dick and be like, I want to. And we got shamefully far along in the brainstorming process before we realized that a book written as if by Abraham Lincoln as a fanfic of Herman Melville with fantasy elements was just too weird. And then, the whole Pride and Prejudice and zombies things happened. And we're like, someone's already done the weird historical mashup thing. So our interest in it went way down. But that one I think it was too weird.
Yeah, so for me, it's where I am in career. There are books that I want to write that it's not the right time career-wise to write. Like yours with Way of Kings, where you had to wait to be able to write that. So I have one. I keep talking about this one that I want to write. That is, it's a noir set in during the Great Depression. My main character is a werewolf who is trying to hide the fact that she's a werewolf because she's on a quest to find the werewolf hunter who killed her father. But werewolves are shunned. They're not secret. Everyone knows that they exist, but it's treated like a disease. So it's treated like leprosy. So you get put into a leprosy camp, a werewolf camp. So she's trying to hide the fact that she has this. Do we need to play fetch? I don't think we can play fetch right now. Sorry. That's a cat, not a dog. No, sorry. I hope everyone understands the tragedy that is happening at my feet right now. So someday it will be the right time to write that, but I think that one is still that one is still probably 5 years away before it'll be the right time.
Yeah, some stuff like that does pop up where I have an idea, I work on it in an outline, and I say, this isn't there yet. I don't know why, but it's not there yet. I need to put this aside and approach it again fresh at some point.
Yeah.
Man, these just keep coming, don't they, guys?
Yeah.
So many.
Times when I am glad I'm not as famous as Brandon. Someone just popped in and said, "Who is that lady?" Hi, my name is Robinette Kowal. Brandon and I wrote the original together. We're on Writing Excuses. I write books.
Friends for years. Mary Robinette won all the awards last year that exist. So,
Did not win all of them.
That's true. I bet there's some golfing awards they decided not to give you because it just didn't fit. They thought about it though. They considered this book is so good. Maybe we should just give her the jacket and have her win a Masters. And they just decided it was probably gonna go over poorly.
Yeah, that would be. I think that's exactly. They sent me a letter confirming that in their scenario. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Other questions, or do you want to chat about something? We took some questions.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Every time we have a question, we talk about it for like 5 hours. So
yes. Hit us with another question, Adam.
So you guys kind of talked about this a little bit, and you can tell me if you think you talked about it enough. But they're wondering if you can talk a little bit more about your process, about co-authoring and things like that. But I know you touched on that at the beginning.
We did touch on the co-authoring process. I mean, turns out neither of us has done it very much, so we just kind of did it, and it worked really well. I don't know.
They're specifically asking what were the advantages of that process?
Oh, what were the advantages? Well, I can tell you the biggest advantage is I got to hang out with my friend and talk about stories in a way that was very fun and see how my friend would bring something different to the story that I had never considered that made the story better. It's the creative side of it is the most fun. The phone calls that we got to have, sometimes while I was sitting signing books like this, where we just chatted about the story and about a scene that wasn't working or something. And it was just like one of the things that I do. Here's a life tip for you as you get older, people watching. Those of you who are already old like me, you already maybe have figured this out. But as college ends, as school ends, now as that age of your life ends, what I find and a lot of people find is hanging out with your friends, though you desperately want to do it, just stops happening. And if you don't create reasons, then a lot of times you just won't end up hanging out with people.
Yeah.
And book group for me every week is, yes, I need feedback on my books. It is very useful to me. But I specifically arranged it as an in-person thing with my friends from college who are all writers, because I'm like, if we don't have a structure, the friends that aren't in my book group, they're ones that are dear, good friends to me that I haven't seen in 10 years, right? And so, finding ways to be able to spend time with your friends that has some sort of structure to it, I've found is just really, really handy. My wife as well, like Emily, when she got married, she was worried that she just wouldn't see her friends very much anymore because that happened. She's like, I'm going to start a book group where we just read a book every month. And the secret is half the time they don't even actually discuss a book because they haven't been able to get to it, or somebody or something's happened, but they still have a structured, we get together every month and have dinner together for the book group. And half the time they do discuss a book. I think you've been to their book group. I know they've done your books. But the reason to start that was not to read books. That's a nice offshoot for it. The reason to start that is she wanted to have a reason that she structuredly got together with her friends. So I would say the biggest and coolest thing is that I just got to have more phone calls with Mary Robinette where we talked about writing stuff, which I love to talk about.
Yeah, I would say that was one of my absolute favorite things about it. The other thing for me, a different side of the process, but it's something that I miss from theater, is when you get something and it does not inherently make sense to you. And you're like, okay, but I know that it makes sense to Brandon, and I know that Brandon's smart. So trying to figure out how it could make sense to me as well pushes me as an author so that I'm not just always going to my comfort place. So that's and it made me a lot more comfortable with fight scenes. because those are not. That's not the kind of books that I write. That's not something that I'm normally having to do. Is a combat scene.
Yeah, and
So
it makes you better at outlining too, right? Or explaining your process or what you're thinking. Like, I didn't realize that some of the holes in my outline that you're like, this makes no sense. I didn't realize they didn't make sense because very few people read my outlines, and those who do, at this point in my career, they just don't question, right? The editor doesn't say, this doesn't make sense. They say, well, it always works out for Brandon, so I'll just assume. I guess. I don't know. They never, but then you bring this up, I'm like, wow, that is a huge hole that I would have had to fix when writing it, and I didn't even see it, and it doesn't make sense to me either now that I look at it from that light.
I remember that conversation where we were both like, because I was like, well, you've got, I don't understand this. Can you tell me how this plays out? And you're like, oh,
yeah.
Oh, this one doesn't.
That's a big problem. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. That exactly.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't make sense to me, and you would say, "Oh, well, it's because of this, this, and this." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And that there was that one where we were both like, "Oh yeah, no, that's a huge plot hole.
That's a big problem." Yeah.
There's a problem there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. So there you go. There's some answers.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are we ready for another one?
Sure.
The next one is, how much of a sense of your characters do you have before you begin writing? Do you feel that they are nearly fully formed before drafting, or do you have a kind of general idea that becomes much fuller as you write your first draft? And how does that carry out over sequels?
It varies from each project to project. I don't know about you.
For me, generally, characters, the thing I know the least about before I start writing. Until I've seen through someone's eyes, I really don't feel like I know them. I like outline. I like to have a solid outline. But every time I've tried to outline a character too much, it ends up not working. I just have to write and see who they are. This is why there's sometimes a blurry line between when the outlining ends and the writing starts for me, because I'll be like, all right, I need to try a scene from this character's viewpoint. Let's try the scene. All right, now I can go back to the outline because I know better how this character sees the world, and I can work on this. And then I'll like, oh, I need to write this scene. And so it's like a gradual moving away from the outline. But because I like outlines so much, because they're such a tool I like, I never completely stop outlining, right? Like I'm always writing, being like, all right, I'm tweaking these next 4 chapters, the outline of these, as the character has grown to be someone else while I'm writing. And it's often fun for me to look back at my first outline and be like, oh, wow, I can't believe that I had that in there, because the outline has changed and evolved so much as I write the character.
Yeah, I will have things that I discover about the character as I'm writing. Sometimes I will have planned stuff ahead of time that I thought is like, oh, this is going to be this major through line for the character. It's going to be so cool. And then I'm like, oh, actually, no, this is a grace note for the character. And this other thing that I didn't plan is actually their major through line. Yes, I will throw it. Yes, go. Good job. She loves hair ties. And so when she is in the mood, she chases them and then brings them back to me so that I will throw them for her again.
That's awesome. My cat, Pinecone, he wants you to throw something, but then he gets annoyed that it's not alive and doesn't bring it back and just goes off and does something else. Like there's that moment of excitement. Something's rolling past. I pounce it. Oh, wait, it is yet another, little ball of tinfoil. I know what these are. I bat at it. It doesn't keep moving. Why am I even here?
Yeah, this is not what I signed up for. Question: I have the room that I have moved into. This is where I record audiobooks, but it's over the living room. It's specifically over the television in the living room, so my parents can't watch TV when I'm recording audio. I told them it would be totally fine tonight. Can you hear the explosions and things?
I can't, but I'm listening to you via a Bose speaker set up beneath a computer screen.
Okay.
So
I'm going to assume that it is all fine, because you would probably be able to.
Usually they have to deal with the bird who is occasionally squawking and trying to get on my shoulder to bite the buttons off of my coat. So I think that they will, that this will be calm and serene.
Explosions are an upgrade.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. 2020.
All right. Let's do another
Okay.
question.
In general, what is more important for you as an artist? To have as close to universal acclaim for your books as possible, or to create something more polarizing with many different opinions that create a healthy debate?
Neither.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Neither. Go on. Let's
Okay.
False dilemma.
Yeah.
Logical fallacy.
Yeah, we've talked about those before.
I would say that the first is impossible. What you can have is universal lukewarm or nonchalance. I have never seen universal acclaim. Hamlet has 1-star reviews on Amazon, a sizable number of them, right?
Yeah.
Terry Pratchett has huge numbers of 1-star reviews, who I often list, as my favorite author. And so I would say trying to shoot for universal acclaim, in that direction lies madness. If Shakespeare, if N.K. Jemisin can't get universal acclaim, if she gets 1-star reviews, it's impossible to have universal acclaim, right? Like, she's got the closest that exists, I think. And her work is still very polarizing, because I think that there are many reasons why art is polarizing, but I think people have different tastes, right? Some people don't want to read a book that has second-person viewpoint, and they aren't wrong about their taste to be like, this just doesn't work for me. For other people, like myself, you're like, wow, this is brilliant. How did she do this? But I think that the strongest works are the ones that generally have, they'll make stylistic choices that are intentional, that certain people like and will not work for others. Great example of this.
Yeah.
The new Spider-Man animated show, right? Into the Spider-Verse, I love. One of my favorite movies ever, right? Like, it just rose right to the top. Just everything about it was perfect. And the stylistic choice they made for the number of frames they used and things, I loved. But Peter Alstrom, my editorial assistant and good friend, and somebody whose taste I trust quite a bit, hated the movie. Could not take it because of the choppy movements of the characters. Just threw him off, made him a little sick, made it unwatchable to him. And this was my favorite movie I'd seen in a long, long time. And here is somebody whose taste we usually align with, that didn't like it at all. And the reason he didn't like it is totally a taste reason. And that's just fine. And I think they made a good choice by picking an animated style that was really stylized and cool, but it made it so some people don't like the movie. I would much rather create art that does that than art that tries futilely to be something that everybody likes, because everybody will just be meh on it. That's the best you can hope for, I think. Yeah. If you go that way.
Yeah, for me, it's very similar, unsurprisingly. But it also, I would say, there's an additional layer for me that what I'm going for is to provoke a specific emotion, and so I generally think about someone who is my ideal reader, like a specific person that I am writing this book for, and if it's they're essentially what they are is a user case. A user, a test user. And so if I'm ticking the right boxes for them and it's doing what I want for them, they represent a lot of people that will also have those same reactions. But the other thing that I've been thinking about a lot since we were on the Writing Excuses cruise with Desiree Birch, and she did a thing, and I think we actually had her talk about it about the more personally specific your writing is, the more universal it is in terms of the way other people perceive it and react to it. And that is something that I've absolutely been finding true.
Yeah, that is true. And there are just certain things. It's kind of interesting. I shouldn't overstate my side because there are good counter arguments. I remember being in college and I had a professor who was an art professor. who got up in front of it was a very large class. It was one of these auditorium classes for whatever reason. It was a history class, and so it was the kind of art thing. And he showed some slides, and he said, "I want everyone who thinks this is beautiful to raise their hands." And he started with some abstract things, right? And moved through different styles, and generally was getting like half the audience. And then he moved to just a gorgeous photograph of a sunset, and just everybody's hands went up, right? And it was interesting that the kind of point was that there are some universal experiences that, done very well, almost everyone will react to. Doesn't mean art has to be that, but there is an argument that once in a while you can get this universal response that almost everybody loves a gorgeous sunset. So it was an interesting thing. It's an interesting counterpoint to what I just said.
Yeah, but it's rare, and no one wants to see, like, if the only books that are available are books on sunsets, they become really meh very fast.
They do, indeed. Yeah, I think part of it was the contrast of that that experience that made everybody. If they had all been sunsets and then they showed Monet, I wonder what would have happened then. But So I have a question. What have you been doing during recently pandemic, like, to relax? Has anything different? I asked this because, like, my go-to to relax in the past was playing Magic the Gathering, right? Which I can't do because it was all a way, again, to meet a large number of people that I didn't normally get to see. And that's a bad recipe, particularly doing something that you have to be right across the table. We went digital for writing group, and then eventually, after things calmed down, we just moved outside and put our chairs 6 feet away. But you can't do that with Magic. So I just don't have that part of my life anymore. That was my main hobby. So I've had to find other things to do.
What have you found so far?
I bought a computer. I bought a gaming PC and picked up a few video games that I've been meaning to play for years. So I'm like, well, if I have to do something by myself, I will, go through some of these games. So I've been playing. I played Fallout 4 and Borderlands 3, which were games that I hadn't gotten when they came out because I was just too busy. And I've been wanting to play.
Yeah. I've thought about that, stuff like that. For me, it's been lots of things that are very tangible. This says, like, I held up the crochet, which is something that I did pre-pandemic too. But I've been doing some needlepoint. I built a new counter for the kitchen. So it's been a lot of stuff that I recognize. It's like I recognize what's happening is that I am attempting to exert control over my environment because there is so little control over what's going on. So being able to do something that's tangible, that I can touch, that is permanent, that I can see and handle. It's like, yes, I made that change. That change is that way. There is now a counter that is lovely and butcher block, and that I can do this to, and that I have space to work on.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that I've been doing. A lot more cooking. I thought that with less travel that I would have more time. But that has not really been the case.
Yeah, well, for a lot of people, there has been more time, but it has been anxiety filled. And so it is less productive time. So you have time, but what you can do with it is much more limited. I know that's been the case for Emily, right? Well, I shouldn't say she had more time. We had kids at home, which ate up a lot of time. But there was other time that you wouldn't normally have. But I know, it's been hard to find something to do with that actually relieves tension rather than reminding you of tense things.
Yeah. Oh, also training my cat.
Yes, it's very tangible. You've done a very good job training your cat.
Yeah.
It's been very interesting. There definitely, it's there are some silver linings, some little ones that have taught me things, right? Like I have had more time with my kids than I used to have, right? And that's been kind of cool, because this is kind of very unique to my situation, but the church's prophet came out and said, we're not doing church, right? You're to do church in your house with your family instead of going to a large group meeting. And so we do church in our home every week. Have been, just, with our kids. It helps. The prophet of our church right now is a former heart surgeon. He took this very seriously, appropriately seriously. So like on Sundays, there's no get ready for church and stuff. It's get together with the family, and that's been really cool. It's been really nice. I've really enjoyed it. And the kids can't go many places, so I've been playing video games with them on my new gaming PC. Part of the reason, I'll admit, that I bought this gaming PC, the people, I've told this story on the stream before, but Joel, my oldest, is now 13, and he's getting good at video games, right? He is starting to pass me up in skill level, which is not something they expected to happen so quickly. And we were playing Halo, which is a first-person shooter series that is one of my favorites that they re-released and remastered for PC. And I was playing with him. And I had the old junk computer because I bought him a really nice computer. He'd asked for it for his birthday. So he has like a nice gaming computer. And I had the junker. It could barely render these games. And so he was playing, and I would get shot by something that had moved onto the screen 30 seconds before, and I could barely see. And he would laugh at me. Then he would just run around getting everything. And at the end of a night's gaming session, he would decide to attack his dad, and he would just like kill me 90 times in a row for every once I would kill him. And so I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm buying a gaming PC so I can teach this kid. I can school this kid. And turns out we're pretty matched in skill level, which I was not expecting. I was expecting to smoke him once I had a good PC. It wasn't all the PC. It's the fact that he's learned to play games, and he's good at it. And darn it, he's going to be better than me very soon here.
Those fast twitch muscles of young children.
Oh, man. So, But it's been...
I should get my dad a gaming PC.
That's my silver lining. More time with my family.
Yeah, that's been, for me, also the silver lining is more time with my family. Like this week I'm in Chattanooga, which is where my parents live. Normally Nashville has been home for the past year. And the thing that's been great is like, we can just come over. And because we are all being very good about isolating, we don't have to worry about.
Right. They're part of your isolation group.
Yes, they're part of my pod. So, I get to come over, and I have 13 acres that I can hang out on. And, we've got the pet here. And, they're... Mom and Dad want to say hello, by the way.
Say hi back for me.
I will.
It's been too long.
It has. When it's safe, you have to come back.
Those 13 acres in Utah can be very gorgeous, or it can be scrub. And 13 acres in Chattanooga, particularly your 13 acres, are just gorgeous.
Yeah, the creek makes such a difference. And also, hi, could you not eat the yarn? Hi. Yes, you are very cute, but you're not that cute.
I'm a cat. It's yarn.
I am contractually obligated. She is, of all the cats that I've had, she is the most like a toddler, because her way of interacting with the world is, I'm going to put this in my mouth. Like, could you not? Yeah.
Oh, I have a parrot. Let me tell you, I understand.
No.
I understand.
Yeah, that's true.
This coat jacket is my favorite. Is missing a button right there. I was too slow. He grabbed it. He had it off in under 2 seconds, and then he was wandering back across his perch playing with it. So, yeah.
Oh, well.
I happened on screen, didn't it? Wasn't it on the stream that he bit that button off, or was right before? So he got me. He got my laptop. He got my laptop.
Oh.
Yep. He managed to bite a little hole in the screen.
Oh,
It still
no.
works just fine, but he was like, "Ooh, what's this?" Well, he knows he's not supposed to touch the laptop because he bit it, and then he walked away and he said, "No," which is what he gets told when he does something wrong. And I'm like, "Yes, no, you're not supposed to." He knows the laptop is a no, but that's
he had to.
yes, and it's both frustrating and cute when he says no, because he knows exactly what I'm going to say, and he knows he's in trouble, and he says it, and then it's cute because it's a bird saying no, bad bird. But yes,
Yeah.
don't let your macaw bite your laptop, is what I will say. Be smarter than I am.
Noted. I will keep my macaw far, far from my laptop. Should we see if there's another question?
Yeah, let's do another question. How much time do we have left, Adam?
About 30 minutes.
About 30 minutes. Great.
So this one, the person says, I love the original. I thought the world building was amazing. How did you show all the world building and yet keep the story to novella length?
That's a question for you, Mary Robinette, because I just gave you all this and said, here you go, put this in.
I'm like, well, there was some world building that you put in because there was this whole thing with robots.
Yes.
That we wound up pulling because it was one thing too many.
One thing too many. Yep.
It was specifically that there were Android replacements for people.
Yes.
And
it didn't fit. It was out of theme too. It was just one of those wacky ideas I threw in that as soon as you brought it up, I'm like, yeah, that just totally does not fit theme of what we're doing. Yeah.
So when you're working with compressed space and you need to put dual building, a lot of times what you're doing is you're providing enough of a framework that the reader will then create all the rest of it. And this is something that I learned partly from the fact that I write short fiction, but it's also a puppetry thing. That I know that you are going to invest part of yourself in the story, that you're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And this is true actually at any length of story, that someone will say like the expression that Wax gets when he's particularly annoyed. We all know exactly what that looks like. But there's no possible way for Brandon to fully describe that. What he does is he gives you just some pieces of it, and your brain fills in the rest of it.
Right, and everyone's filling in of that's going to be slightly different.
Yeah,
which is a fun part about it. But yeah.
But we also all know, so one of the things that everybody knows, the way Miss Piggy bats her eyes at Kermit the Frog, and it's so coy that the fluttering of the eyelashes, except that her eyes literally do not move. But we all know that expression. Right. So what I do is I'm like, what are the pieces that I need to give you that will allow you to build the rest of it? So the fact that something that I saw someone talk about was the way different religions interact with this world. I think I actually only talk about one or two religions, but just mentioning those is enough for everyone to assume that we have actually thought out how every religion interacts with this. Like, you build out the rest of the world is there because we've said, here's this piece. Here, hey, Elsie, roll over. Good girl. She's not there right now. Well, now she is, because she just heard me say roll over, and she's like, what, are you doing treats?
Mm-hmm.
But when I said it, because I had established earlier the cat, and you'd seen me do the thing, that that's enough for you to fill in the rest of it. Hi. Okay. Right. Okay. Roll over. Good. Roll over. Good girl. This time there is a cat who did just roll over.
You probably broke some people's brains with that Miss Piggy thing, just kind of casually. You realize that, right?
Yeah.
They're all in their head picturing Miss Piggy blinking her eyes and being like, no, she does, doesn't she?
No. You know Kermit's fantastic tap dance number in Dancing Feet or Happy Feet? Happy Feet. Who's got those? It's one of the iconic tap dance numbers of the 20th century. They literally never show his feet. It's all everything from the waist
all
up.
the legs and the hip movements and things.
There's no even leg movement. It's just arms.
Oh, yeah, just arms.
It is waist up. There's no hip movement. Yeah. So anyway, that's how I do world building. I give pieces and then you all do the rest of the work.
It's a skill to learn in writing, an important skill, because even in a book where you think you have all the space that you need to do all the world building you think you will want, you're actually filling most of that with character and plot, and the world building is there to accent the character and the plot to create conflict and things like that. And when you're doing it right, you aren't spending pages and pages doing the world building. You are spending pages and pages showing characters at odds with their setting and their culture. And in so doing, you are indicating an entire world of culture there for them to be part of. But what you're not doing is an encyclopedia entry on the storm patterns of Roshar or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So so the other piece of that, just to draw a line under what Brandon said, is that what you're looking for are places where your character is interacting with the piece of world building, so that anything that you're doing, particularly in short form, is doing at least double duty. And if you can get it to do more than that, so that you're establishing setting, you're also giving some character insight. Those are the things that allow you to get more world building in there. If it's not a single use item.
And it's actually usually really easy to contrast two characters for that world building, so that you get that third thing by saying, if this is what this character is, and they're thinking about this other character not work, or this one, they're like, oh, this person's very devout, unlike me. Like, that's a pretty obvious way to say it. And that's what you would, you know what I mean? You're going to get across two characters and the setting piece, while probably also laying a foreshadowing foundation for some sort of character moment or plot moment that happens in the future that is analogous to this scene, particularly in short fiction.
Yeah.
Another question.
The next question is, how do you stop from feeling like your stories are cliche or overdone when you work on them for a long time?
Rough question. Yeah.
I mean, it happens to everybody at some point. So it's normal. Here's a tricky thing it's hard to learn, is that something feels cliche and obvious to you because it is happening in your brain and you are living it. So for me, I spent a long time not writing Southern characters, even though that's where I grew up, because I'm like, well, I mean, those are boring characters. And then I have to remind myself that most of the planet does not live in the American South. So actually doing characters that are Southern and really owning that makes them more interesting. It's not cliche. The other side of that is that sometimes it is cliche, and the reason it feels cliche is because you are reaching for a trope that you already know, and you're grabbing it because it's familiar. So what I would say is that if it feels boring to you and cliche, ask yourself, like, what would make it more interesting? Is that getting deeper into it, or adding another element. And if you can think of, here are, you know, 3 other places that I can immediately think of having seen exactly this trope. All right, that's fine. But what else? What are you bringing to it? Like, what is your, you know, what are you adding to that? Because you can, you know, there's tons of, you know, the way the original opens, woman wakes up in a hospital room and doesn't know why she's in a hospital room, and it's a white hospital room. Like, we literally, we begin this with white room syndrome, like, which is one of the cliches out there. We literally begin that
one. Yep.
Yeah, waking up in the white room, and that's like, and we're doing something else with it. Like, there's a reason we're playing with that trope.
One thing I've noticed is that people often, new writers seem to be very worried that when they say, I'm really worried that my story's derivative of like yours, Brandon. And I'll say, well, what's derivative? And like, well, it has a magic system based on metals, and it uses like, you know, one of them's kind of telekinetic and stuff like that. And I'm like, that is not the stuff to worry about you being derivative. That is like, when you're worried about being derivative, you should be worried, is my character making the standard response to the situation because it's what I've seen in film and it's the easy answer and not what the character would actually do? That's when the cliche is dangerous. If it's actually what the character would do and you are making us understand that and feel that, it's not a cliche then. The big things I worry about are like, you know, the villain monologuing is a good example. This is something to watch out for because you've seen it so often and readers have seen it so often. And part of the reason why it doesn't work is it's just, you've set up this villain who's really smart and capable, but in this moment they have to be stupid in order to let the hero get away, and it's out of character. There are certain characters who monologue. You've got me monologuing again, where you're just like, this is perfect. This is the character. And don't worry that, you know, your fantasy world feels like mine, or even like, you know, you've got some characters that have an interaction that's similar to something you've read. Like, I consider myself pretty good with plot. And I don't think I could have picked out, after reading the summary, that 50 Shades of Grey was originally a Twilight fanfic. Like, the fact that it's a Twilight fanfic is just so irrelevant to what that story is trying to do and things like that, that if someone can literally take a fanfic and change it around and it is perfectly original, then you're worrying about the wrong things being cliched, is my opinion most of the time. Yeah.
Like, my first novel, Shades of Milk and Honey, is literally Jane Austen fanfic. But do you know what? Do you know what else that's really interesting that's going on? Because there's an element of the magic system that Brandon and I have both played with, which is that it's a bunch of women talking about magic as threads, and When I went back and read, when I started reading Wheel of Time again after Brandon started writing it, I was like, oh my goodness, here I am, totally influenced by the way magic was described in Wheel of Time, and had forgotten that had influenced me. And you could not have 2 more different interpretations of that magic system, even though the language for it is the same.
This isn't an example of art inspiring art, which is what we want to have happen. And writers, you will panic about this, right? Everyone talks, you know, I got used to people saying, wow, the magic system for Mistborn is so original. I'm like, yeah, it's so original. And then I thought, wait a minute, it's basically Magneto. The whole cool thing about, I was watching X-Men, I'm like, yeah, that's my magic system. They're just worse at being Magneto. They are Magneto, but bad at it. And that's Mistborn's super original magic in a nutshell, is take Magneto and make it harder, make them worse. That doesn't matter. Even though when I realized that, part of me panicked. I'm like, I am so derivative. I am terrible. I just stole this wholesale. No, the story is that's not what it's about. It's about the emotional reaction, as Mary Robinette has said, and it is about, you know, the characters you're telling a story about. Focus on making sure their reactions feel authentic, then you'll be okay.
Mhm.
And don't panic because something's a trope also. Everything is a trope. Make sure that your character's responses are authentic to them and that you're not taking the easy outs, and I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, trope just means it's a building block. And some building blocks, and they have different uses. It also depends on when someone encounters your work. Because, again, with the not 50 Shades, with the for crying out loud, Twilight books.
Mm-hmm.
The number of reviews of American Werewolf in Paris that are like, oh my God, they have totally ripped off werewolves from, does she know that they've ripped off werewolves from her? Also similar things about Dracula, where people they're being earnest because they found Dracula after they found Twilight, and they have no idea which one is the original, so to speak.
The famous one from among my friends is that I have a friend who legitimately thought that Lord of the Rings was a Sword of Shannara ripoff because he read Sword of Shannara and really liked it, and someone handed him Lord of the Rings. He's like, oh, this is just a wholesale lifting of Lord of the Rings. And I happen to really like Sword of Shannara. It's great. But it does use some of the Tolkien-esque tropes and things like that. And he had it a little bit reversed, causality, little
like
off there.
Shakespeare's just full of cliches.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, man! I can't believe he said that thing that we say all the time, and it is in every movie. Why did he do that?
Yeah, why did he use so many cliches?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that guy.
Such a hack.
He kind of was,
right,
but he's
we?
the good kind of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is actually also the thing, is that Shakespeare was ripping off all of his plots.
Yes.
Like, none of his plots are original.
Nope. They're desperately unoriginal. Like, there are things being released at his time that, they're all plumbing the same source material, but that did it in a certain way, and he obviously read that and said, oh, I'm going to do it that way too.
Yeah. Like
it's no
Romeo
copyright.
and Juliet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, copyright there was.
Oh, was
copyright? Yeah, but it meant something different.
Okay.
So what copyright meant was literally that you were giving a printer the right to copy your work.
Okay.
So there was
like right.
that
publication rights.
Right. But the copyright law of the way that we experience it today is not the same. I'm
really excited to see what happens when Batman enters the public domain.
Oh,
10 years from now, right?
Yeah.
Batman and Superman, I think, are both like around 10 years from now.
Yeah.
We're starting to get into the copyright tyranny has lapsed, and we're going to finally start getting things in the public domain again.
That'll be exciting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions?
So, Adam, question for us.
Yes. They are hoping that you guys can just talk about the importance of fantasy in our lives today.
Importance of fantasy.
Since we live in kind of the darkest timeline.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, that escapism is considered a kind of almost a dirty word sometimes. And I don't think that it should be. At the same time, there are, in my opinion, no purely escapist works. Every writer who's writing something is writing about their life and what's happening to them at the time and the situation around them, and is offering commentary whether they want to or not, by what they choose to put in their stories, right? And so I'm both of the opinion that we shouldn't be so down on someone reading something just because it's fun. Having fun is an emotion that we need. Stories are about provoking emotion, and that's a very valid emotion. When my wife wants to read a fun, she picked one up, a fun, clean romance. She just wanted, because everything was awful in some way. She just wanted to go to that and relax. And she picked up one she knew would be relaxing and fun. That doesn't mean that artist isn't creating art, though, that writer. And I think that's the thing we need to separate. I don't know. I always make the talk about, I feel like fantasy is kind of crunches for your imagination. That there's this theory that we read in the first place, like the purpose of stories is to vicariously experience strong emotions through the eyes of characters to better help us learn to cope and prepare for strong emotions in our lives. And I do think there's some strong validity to that. And I think that fantasy, one of the values of it is presenting a world very different from our own, and asking you to pretend it's real for a while helps expand our ability to see the world in new and different ways. That's at least, if I'm being on my sort of self-important, this is why we're important sort of thing. I think every person who does every job could have something like that they say, and they're probably right, but that's my one for fantasy novels.
Yeah, mine, because I agree with everything that Brandon said, and the other thing that I would say that fantasy does, and science fiction as well, is that it allows us to talk about some of the big issues without the emotional baggage that is linked directly to the things that are going on right here, right now. So it allows us to kind of step back a little bit and get sort of a broader view of what's going on. And I think seeing those interconnecting pieces then gives us tools when we come back to our own life to understand kind of how to interact with it and how to respond to it. Like, it's a science fiction reference, but how many of us have used some form of fear is the little mind killer as a way to just get through the day? It's like, yeah, we're not Bene Gesserit, but we understand what that means, that it's just like you have to, and we've taken that tool from this imagined world. So I think that's one of the things that fantasy does really well.
Yeah, it is one of the coolest aspects of it. I would agree, and it can ask the questions that we don't have the framework in life right now, like the questions of what will we do when we meet intelligent life from another world? How do we respond to that? What do we do? What do we do as a society? I think it's an important question to ask. Now, granted, non-intelligent life might be as close as Venus, we found out just recently, which is so cool.
Cool.
But this is a valuable thing that our genre does, and I think fantasy asks some of those questions in different ways. Robert Jordan, we brought up Wheel of Time. He said, the Wheel of Time is about being told that you need to save the world, but you're not an epic hero from one of these stories. You are just, in your opinion, a regular farm boy. And what does that do to someone, and what do you do with that, and how do you respond to that? Fantasy's been asking that sort of question. What do normal people do when they're put in extraordinary circumstances? I think it's a fun question to ask, and we are all asked in our lives to do some things where we have responsibility we were not expecting.
Yes.
We were not anticipating. And I do think that, some of those dry runs, so to speak, from fantasy novels, at least help us think about that.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I love about it as a reader, as well as a writer. Like, one of the things that I think that we were playing is, is that question of how much editing of the world around us is important for any individual. Where your comfort levels are, and it's not like the thing that it does is it allows us to think about those things, but because we aren't putting them front and center in the story, is she has to do this thing, like that is the story. Terrible thing has happened to her. She has to do this thing in response to that. And then all around the edges are this other question that we get to kind of circle and experiment and poke at, that also reflect the world that we are in, and are unexpectedly relevant to life in the pandemic. Like, hang on, Oh, right. Darn it. I'm in the wrong medium here. If I were in Zoom, then I could throw up, I could have a virtual background.
Right.
And, how is it more authentic and more real that you're seeing my actual space? Like I had to clean.
Right. Yeah. And
So
for me, you were seeing a white background carefully prepared by my assistant. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So those are the things that fantasy allows us to think about ahead of time before they become real, or some aspect of it.
The central question of the story is also, one of the reasons that I wanted to write the story is that central question of how much, when you recognize your own capacity for doing things you didn't think you were capable of doing, what does that do to you? And is it true? Is it not? That quest to find out what you're actually capable of under certain circumstances. That's the central question. I can't say more without giving too many spoilers.
Yeah.
But that is what the story is about for me, is coping with that idea.
Yeah.
And it was just really fun to delve into that and to dig into it.
Yeah, it was.
So where are we, Adam?
It's almost 8.
Almost 8.
Yes.
So all right. So
right.
do we want to do a final question or kind of a final goodbye or something like that?
Let's go ahead and let's do a final question.
Final question.
Give us
Okay.
a final question.
Do you have any advice for writing a story where the primary viewpoint character is not the protagonist?
Primary viewpoint character is not the protagonist.
There is a follow-up sentence if it will help.
So it's very hard to write a viewpoint character who's not the protagonist, but it is possible. Someone who did this really well was Jane Yolen. She has a short story collection that I've lauded a bunch, and there's a story in there about a monk who ends up following around one of the people from Arthurian lore. And the monk is not the protagonist per se, though the monk still chooses to follow, which is kind of and so that's a good example of it. Your challenge is going to be, you could argue that most of the Mad Max films are also this, where the protagonist of the movie is usually the person that Mad Max meets. Fury Road is a good example of this, and he's just along to help kind of accidentally. Tips on
I think I would say that for me, when I've seen this done well, it is because of the commentary that the viewpoint character is able to offer. Watson and Holmes is a good example of that. The Great Gatsby is a good example of that. There's a lot of stories out there where what it's doing for you is giving someone, giving you an entryway into to see and understand what's going on by having an intermediary. But having said that, it's really hard, and that character has to be an engaging personality in and of themselves. It's
the real danger is that they will just act like a passive observer of a story, which is really dangerous because the reader doesn't connect to them; they connect to the other person, but then get frustrated because of that disconnect. And so you kind of have to make that disconnect a selling point in some way. The reader has to be on board with, this is why you're doing this. Yeah. And in the Jane Yolen story, it's because this monk is falling in love with the character. And that's the actual story. And the way they're talking about, I think it's Lancelot that he's falling in love with, or I can't quite remember. But it's this idea of like that romance is part of the motivation for reading the story. And it's also this like story of the commentary on this person who's like immortal and is doing this thing. And the normal person's viewpoint of it is really interesting. And whereas the immortals, you would think that would be the most interesting, but it's really not. it's that intersection between immortality and mortality that becomes the interesting part of the story. And it was really memorable, told from that viewpoint, and it was the right viewpoint. But it's not the one that I would have immediately gone to tell that story. And so make it a selling point is what I would say.
Well, and I think one of the other things that both Watson character and also in Gatsby and the example you're talking about is that while they are there to provide commentary, they are also there to keep us from understanding things.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
That if we win, like if we win Holmes's head, it's like he walks into a room and it's like, well, the murderer is, and the story's over. And
in this case, Lancelot just knows too much, and the monk doesn't know why he's doing the things he's doing, and this is part of the story. Yeah.
So it can be useful to give you that, someone to stand in for the audience, going, but what's going on? But it depends. It's hard.
Well, I have signed a whole bunch of stuff. Over 2,000 books. Wow. Mary Robinette, thanks for keeping me company.
Absolutely.
You know how bored I get signing books?
I hit a point in my shawl where I was like, I'm actually going to have to stop because I have to start counting, and I can't quite hit another part of the pattern and converse at the same time.
I'm worried that in future people are going to want the cat back rather than the squawky bird. But we'll have to bring on Freya or something.
Yeah. If you ever want, I can just set up my camera and let Elsie hang out with you. She would be. There you go. She will do commands. We
just have to be able to
not 100% reliable, but she has done commands from someone who gave them via screen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you guys who all came to the stream. The original, you can get it on your favorite audiobook providers around the world.
Yep. Thank you all.